page and to our second national event with Enright and Emily Donaldson. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for watching and supporting One Page as we come together to support each other, to support writers and booksellers all across the country. I also wanted to take a few minutes before we hear from the great Anne Enright talking about her new novel, Actress, to encourage you and invite you to check out the Toronto International Festival of Authors, which runs virtually from October the 22nd to November the 1st, 2020. This will be TIFA's 41st edition and my first as director. And this year we have over 200 authors, artists and performers from across Canada and the world coming together for 11 days of events. They'll be taking part in 200 events and activities, from live conversations to performances to specially commissioned maps, apps and podcasts, covering fiction, poetry, art, science, music, memoir, and much, much more. Not to mention our TIFA Kids program, closing the final weekend. So from Richard Ford to Val McDermott, Jill Adamson to Desmond Cole, Fernanda Melchor to Colin McCann, there really is a wealth of authors and writers and books and stories to discover. And you can check out all of the festival's 2020 content by going to our website, festivalofauthors.ca, where you can register, curate your own festival program, and all for free. So please do check out the program. I look forward to seeing you there. And now I will turn over to Gregory to kick off the event.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me. My name is Gregory Mccormick. I'm the Manager of Cultural and Literary Programming at Toronto Public Library. Welcome, everyone, to our second one-page event. We start all of our events by remembering and acknowledging that Canada is unceded Indigenous land. This land, as we know, was inhabited by hundreds of Indigenous communities who lived, worked, loved, and died on this land long before it was officially discovered. One Page gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. One Page is a network of Canada's libraries and book and literary festivals coming together to present content for Canadians, but it's also an opportunity to share with all of you the rich literary culture that Canada has in almost every community. Because of this national network, our viewers on both this channel and on our YouTube channel come from all over Canada, from Halifax and rural Nova Scotia to the Sunshine Coast to Vancouver Island and just about every market in between. Our founding organizations include us at the Toronto Public Library, Blue Metropolis International Literary Festival in Montreal, Kingston Writers Fest, Ottawa International Writers Festival, Toronto International Festival of Authors, and you just heard from Roland there, and Vancouver Writers Fest, plus Thin Air Winnipeg International Writers Festival and the Fry Festival in Moncton, New Brunswick, and just about every major library system in the country. So that's super exciting, and we're really happy that every week we're adding more partners, more libraries, more festivals, and more booksellers. We have a bit of time to address some of your questions today for Anne, but be sure and enter your questions into the Ask a Question box along the bottom of the screen. To stay on top of all of One Page's events, you can click on follow above along the top there, and you can get all of the new events as they are added and as an event is about to go live. Some upcoming events include Tommy Orange with Wagisha Rice on Thursday, October 29th, as well as James McBride on his novel Deacon King Kong, Norwegian crime writer Yo Nesbo, and Indian Canadian actor, model and activist Lisa Ray. All of those events will go up soon on Crowdcast and on our website, onepagelit.ca. And you can also find out more about some of our partner organizations by going to onepagelit.ca, following us on Facebook, Twitter, One Page Lit on Twitter, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Not all the events are listed yet, but they're going up every week or so. So come back and check out everything that we have coming up this fall. If you see the green button under your screen, that is where you want to click to buy Anne's really wonderful novel, Actress. That link will take you to One Page Lit CA's collection of bookstores across Canada. Now's your chance to show your love to one of Canada's favorite local bookstores. As you know, this pandemic's been very difficult on many around the world, and bookstores are no exception. So if you're able to show your love to a local bookseller and buy Anne's book, we are adding more bookstores each week to that list. So click there and you'll find your local bookseller, and you can order a copy of Actress today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our host and our guest of honor. Emily Donaldson is a critic and a writer, an editor whose work appears regularly in Canada's major newspapers, as well as other publications. She is currently the editor of Canadian Notes and Queries, the country's oldest magazine of cultural and literary criticism. She is from Montreal, but she lives in Toronto with her husband and 2 sons. And of course, our guest of honor, Anne Enright. Let me pull them up here. Sorry, it's my fault here. I'm going to bring them up. There we go. Hello. Okay, now I'm going to mute them, and I will introduce Anne, and then we'll be off. And of course, our guest of honor, Anne Enright, won the Man Booker Prize and the Irish Fiction Award for her really wonderful novel, The Gathering, which became a longtime national bestseller in Canada. And her latest novel, Actress, the subject of today's conversation, was longlisted for the Booker Prize. And in addition to the 6 other novels she's written, she has published 2 books of stories, and she joins us this afternoon from her home in Dublin. And I'm going to turn it over to the 2 of you and have a happy conversation.
Hi. Here we are. Can you hear me, Anne?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're larger.
Well, this is a thrill for me.
It is amazing.
Lovely to be here. I mean, be here and be also there where, Canada, across Canada, all those libraries and festivals. It's amazing. So, yeah, lovely to talk to you, Emily. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great now because I get to see you. It's a thrill. I love your work and I loved this book. And we spoke just before this event started about, we weren't sure if we were going to do a reading, but I think the gut feeling is that everybody wants to hear you read, myself included. So I will perhaps give us a very brief introduction to your book, Actress, which tells us the story retrospectively of an actress who's a single mother. Her name is Katherine O'Dell. She is an Irish actress, but she's really English. She's born in England, but her brand becomes this sort of icon of the Irish stage and screen. But it's told through the eyes of her daughter and her only child, Norah. And so Katherine comes up through theater in Ireland in the 40s and then eventually moves to US, becomes a star of Broadway. She ends up in movies, I think in the 50s. But then as a woman in her mid-40s suffers a sort of the decline that I think many of us are well familiar with, which is she
Speak for yourself.
That
happened to me. But no, rumor has it. No. Yeah, she's she was famous when she was 19. So the screen is as she says, as Norah, her daughter in the book says, the screen is forensic. Not these nicely fuzzy digital screens, but those big, Yes, and so she shoots a guy in the foot because it's
literally.
Yeah, because it's kind of stupid thing to do, going around shooting people. So, and her daughter Norah writes the book about this legendary mother. And I will read I'll read a page or two. I mean, just a bare page, Emily, because people like the accent. There is a thing about Irish writing that we get away with. Perhaps, I don't know, do we get away with a lot or not, actually? All writing is making things up. So I suppose it's a respectable thing to do, to make things up, but there can be a performative, or it's part of the oral tradition. Some of the writers that you'll know are like storytellers. But anyway, so this is Norah, the narrator of the book. People ask me, what was she like? And I try to figure out if they mean as a normal person. What was she like in her slippers eating toast and marmalade? Or what was she like as a mother? Or what was she like as an actress? We didn't use the word star. Mostly, though, they mean, what was she like before she went crazy? As though their own mother might turn overnight, like a bottle of milk left out of the fridge, or they might themselves be secretly askew. Something happens as they talk to me. I'm used to it now. It works in them slowly. A growing wonder, as though recognizing an old flame after many years. You have her eyes, they say. People loved her. Strangers, I mean. Squawks. Strangers, I mean. I saw them looking at her and nodding, though they failed to hear a single word she said. And yes, I have her eyes. At least I have the same colour eyes as my mother, a hazel that in her case people like to call green. Indeed, whole paragraphs were penned about bog and field when journalists looked into my mother's eyes. And we have the same way of blinking, slow and fond, as though thinking of something very beautiful. I know this because she taught me how to do it. Think about cherry blossom, she said, drifting on the wind. And sometimes I do. Such were the gifts I got from Katherine O'Dell, star of stage and screen. How are you, oh mother of mine? Never better, she used to say. And the blossoms drifted by the tree load when she looked at me. There was a man in the kitchen in Dartmouth Square, where everything important in my life seems to have happened, who knew someone who'd slept with Marilyn. And never washed, he said. Some evening in my childhood, I came down the stairs to hear this news, and he was such a nice old man. It stained me ever since. So when people ask, what was she like? I have an urge to say, pretty clean, actually. And then to add, I mean, by the standards of the day. So that's her trying to, you know, present and not present Katherine O'Dell.
That's great. And maybe that would be a segue to telling us how this character, the seed of this character was for you, or even the seed of Norah. Was it?
Well, actually, the seed of that
or...
Marilyn story. Somebody asked me about Marilyn, like I'd chosen the most famous actress on the planet, but actually, that was the story about Marilyn, and I heard it from older people in Dublin in my 20s. You know, Marilyn was famously unclean, and I don't know whether Arthur Miller said anything about that in Time Bends or whether it was part. Anyway, so that potential shaming of the of a glorified, idealized 60-foot high character was always there, and so the book is quite interested in glamour, but also interested in gossip and anecdote and being known, and how people are, you know, how people are known, basically, one way or the other. And I don't know about the seed of it. It's always hard. If you knew what the seeds were, I never tell anyone, and maybe not even myself, what the seeds of a book are, because you don't want to lose the ability to find a seed wherever it might be. But I had, you know, many decades ago, I had worked briefly on the stage in Dublin, and I had thought I might become an actress, and I had, and a lot of my cohort became stage people, and I always wanted to write about them. I found it really romantic and a really tough life, and I thought if I ever did do a stage book, it would have to also be a kind of a tough book as well as everything else, because of the madness and the kind of joyful madness of people who make that their profession. You know, when I was deciding not to be an actress, 95% of actors in Ireland were unemployed, and 1 in 9 roles available was for women. See, so what kind of, I mean, those days you'd call it egotism. You said, you know, girls at school would say, oh, very egotistical. Now you'd call it narcissism. But what kind of self-belief and purity goes into that kind of very disciplined, very difficult profession? So there is sort of where it came from.
And self-belief, to think that you'll be the one.
Oh, but belief, actually, you know, sorry, I'm fierce for interrupting, but belief, what gets Katherine through, she's a star early on, but she becomes an actress. She becomes somebody who's interested in her craft. And that is what gets her through most of, you know, the 30s, before she goes a bit binky bonk. That's what sustains her, is that interest in craft.
Yes. In fact, one of the things I loved is these sort of petty men who come into her life. And there's a couple of obvious ones, including the man she shoots, Boyd O'Neill. There are these producers and men who work later in her career, when she becomes older, they sort of try to repress her, not because it's not anything to do with her sexuality or anything like that. That's not the threat. The threat is her talent, right?
That's right.
That she has something, and they do not.
For lack of a better word, and I think it's a bit of a catch-all, but if you're looking at what is quite a narcissistic profession, so is writing, making things beautiful, and doing so as an individual. These are very passionate sort of ways to live your life, and open to all kinds of depredations. But there are two men in her life, Duggan and Boyd, or in Nora's life as well, the writer's life. Who, and as you say, they want to possess, is one of the things that people want to do with that kind of talent. They want to own, control, possess, manage. The lives of talented women are full of such men. But further than that, in this book, they want to soil or stain or damage it as well. And it is a kind of, it's not jealousy, it's a kind of envy. Because it's like a narcissist competition. It's like they're the goddamn narcissists, you know. there's Katherine O'Dell being somehow glorious and frail at the same time, or self-sacrificing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, you look at what was happening when I was writing the book in 2016. I started writing the book. And I hadn't wanted to do the theatre because it was too. It had its own writing, you know. It was too much its own art. And then I picked up a book in a shop in Brooklyn, actually, about Valerie Solanas, who shot Andy Warhol. And I thought to myself, why am I researching Siobhan McKenna, who is this wonderful Irish actress who went to New York, and that was a very and was Saint Joan in George Bernard Shaw's Saint Joan. And in the film, then subsequently, a beautiful actress, beautiful Irish voice, beautiful Gaelic she had as well, Siobhan McKenna. And I used to see her house from the bus on the way into school. So I was saying, why am I looking at Siobhan McKenna and her Peggy Mike Playboy of the Western world? You know, those kind of, sure, have lost him surely. You know, that kind of thing, when I could be looking at Valerie Solanas, who goddamn shot goddamn Andy Warhol. Why am I not writing an edgy, modern book? And then I thought, well, if Siobhan McKenna, as it were, quite rightly decided to shoot somebody in the foot, maybe, I'm sorry, I'm banging the furniture here. If she'd, you know, one of the amazing things when I was researching Hollywood, or one of the amazing things when you research what it is to be a woman on the planet, is how few women take revenge in any way. They're so nice. We are so nice. For all the bad things that happen to women everywhere, they're so nice about it. So nice. Anyway, so Katherine was finally not nice.
And I mean, if you were writing this,
so angry, they say. Sorry, that's my favorite question. Why are you so angry? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, sorry, Emily.
Well, you were writing this 2016, you said 2016, 2017. Yeah. I mean, so when you were writing this also must have been full Me Too, full Harvey Weinstein.
It wasn't full Me Too until September 2017. And that was when the Harvey Weinstein story broke. And then it was full Me Too for two years of an amazing first year and then a second year. It didn't impact on the Irish scene as much because I don't know how it was in Canada, but there are different libel laws in Ireland than there are in the States, in the United States. So there's a different management of information here. So it was a slightly milder moment than this very fierce and abrupt moment in American culture and life. And so I was watching all these things, thinking, damn, my book has been eaten out from under me by the currency of the news. So I had to adapt kind of as I went, and realized as I was doing so a lot of the work, the graft was being taken away from me, that I didn't have to break this as news, whatever was going on.
No, and in fact,
You
I
know?
think too, for me, that was a very interesting, huge strength of it was that the sort of downplaying to some degree within her working realm of that sexual thing, which does occur sort of in her backstory, but that really it's just this sort of pettiness and these minor power plays with these dudes. You know?
Looking back at Dublin in the 70s is a great way of looking at self-importance and importance in authority and of all kinds. So these men are very important men by their own lights, and they are in the media, and they are opinion makers, and it wears a little like old linoleum or something. It's like retro print, that they would have met Frank Kermode. That would have been very important at the time. And one of them turned down Pinter's first wife when she importuned him sexually. There was a guy recently died in Ireland, and one of the things he was known for was turning down Sylvia Plath. A terribly important man, clearly.
Right.
So
you gain power in the repressing of the other.
Yeah, well, just how a country with a big tradition and a big-hearted tradition and a large and justifiably large sense of itself, but quite impoverished at the same time, quite enclosed, and how all societies are enclosed. We make our little tribes, So how those little circles make themselves feel important about themselves, choose, select, include, exclude, say, oh, marvelous or terrible or whatever,
Well, it's interesting what you said about the number of unemployed actors there in Ireland, and especially in this period of time, because reading this, when I read about Katherine getting washed up at the age 45 and not getting roles, from the North American point of view, we've always seen that in the UK and Ireland and in Britain, that we see these actresses who do manage to age on screen, where it is in some ways a North American phenomenon of actresses being knocked out as soon as they hit 30, So, but clearly that's not the case.
Well, Katherine is pretty much pre-plastic surgery, that has to be said. So, I do think that she also never took exercise unless accompanied by some kind of woman in a white coat. It's like, but she never ate a vegetable unless she was on a diet, and she didn't have a pair of flat heels. But I do remember something about the 90s being that was the decade where flat shoes became available in the shops of Dublin. So that's a very aging lifestyle. The old 40 fags a day and a bottle of Chianti. No exercise. So people look better these days, and the shelf life is extended. But there was that amazing expendability and a valorization of youth itself that got quite dodgy when sexual liberation hit and youth. In Hollywood of the 60s and 70s, the thing about young and younger women became extremely problematic. And that there was something very disposable or wrong or gone over about women who weren't. These things are painful to even discuss, but we're still putting the dream away. Whatever that dream was, whatever that fantasy was, we're still expunging fantasies, and that is something that the book, you say, the pettiness of the male characters, but what Katherine O'Dell does, and it's a kind of like a fake memoir, or an attempt at a memoir, and the daughter details her life on stage and her roles. But what Katherine O'Dell does, she goes through one after another of slightly cliched secondhand fictions, usually written by men. So she starts off as the tiny woman in the white nightdress in a trance. That woman, I don't know what that's called. But
The Awoken. The Awoken?
oh no, I mean I called it The
Oh.
Awoken in the
Oh.
novel, and I had great
that's
fun
so-
making up these kind
yeah.
of makey uppy ones. But there were so many different tropes that were available, and none of them satisfying except in the wrong way somehow. And we're used to talking about celebrity where, you know, the mask eating into the face, you know, or celebrities being hollowed out by the gaze of the crowd. But actually, Katherine O'Dell is also trying on and discarding one or other version of a performance. And so questions can be asked by the end of the book. Well, what was she like? People say. We didn't really get a sense of Katherine herself, as if they hadn't read the first page that I just read to you. I read it out. People say, what was she like? You're not going to necessarily get a true essential, you're not going to get to the sweetness of knowledge of the mother in this book. You're just going to be, sorry about that.
We're not, but
no.
one of the lines that I don't have at hand, but
Norah, yeah, you're right.
Nora's line is that you know, you have this sort of onion skin of a character, Catherine, who, as you say, it's like she's just always performing. Even for her daughter, she's always performing. And Norah knows all these tics, and she in some ways enables and applauds it. She enjoys it, but she also sees through it. But you have a line at which I say I've now forgotten, that was something about, but I knew her no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, I knew her despite.
Yeah.
And there was a wonderful poignancy to that, as her daughter knows her.
It's a little scene where they live in a house that's a square, so the windows look out over a little park in the middle of the square, Dartmouth Square in Dublin. And Catherine likes bringing little Norah in her gingham dress out to the park for picnics, so she can be the mother with the. So Nora's there, and she's pouring, you know, invisible tea for her dolls. She's also playing at having a picnic. So what's the difference between playing and faking? But she's slightly unsettled because she feels that her mother is performing for the unseen crowd. And she says she doesn't have to do that, because she didn't have to pretend to be my mother and be my mother at the same time. That would be like double cream. So it's like, it would be twice as nice. So I do think that the performance of love can be an enhancement. You know, this is what Valentine's Day is all about. It's a huge fake. I mean, it's a huge materialistic fake. But these small rituals, these storied moments that we give to ourselves, where things are formalized, they make us. It makes it so nice. So you know, often ideas of the fake, and particularly there's a long history of calling women fake, right? And actresses in particular, long history of talking about the mask and what rot might be, you know, what death lies behind the painted woman, all those things. It's somehow sexualized, but it's also about even more than sex, even more than morality. But in this book, fakeness is closer to glamour, and that glamour is that pang of when a thing becomes beautiful and lost at the same time. Just that little kind of cusp.
And yes,
I'm starting to like my book again as I'm talking about it. Actually,
we're bringing you around, are we?
Yeah. Well, there was a pandemic in the middle, you know.
We'll work on you. Yes, I mean, even as I say, so at the beginning, you know, she's known as this great Irish actress with the red hair and the green eyes, but she isn't actually Irish. And Norah actually doesn't mind this. She thinks it's okay until her mother starts palling around with IRA types during the Troubles. And then she finds it a bit much. This is where she starts to draw the line, yes?
Yes, well, Irish nationalism was built out of stories, some of them enduring and lovely. And those stories on the stage of the Abbey Theatre, for example, were very much part of how we made ourselves to be a country, a nation state after the colonial times. And, you know, but Catherine started off in the pre-independence days, where nation states were not so clear about themselves. So actors in the 40s used to move from London they'd go up to Nottingham, they'd go over to Belfast, they'd go down to Cork. It was all part of the same circuit. And they were also a kind of mongrel tribe. Nobody was really looking for anyone's, not just passport, but they weren't really looking in a group of actors for identity. The whole idea was shifting identities and having, different identity every night. So it wasn't, their only pride was being chameleons, really. Anyway, so she comes from a pre-nationalist space. There was a wonderful, hammy, old, glorious actor, very intelligent, called Mcleomor, and he started the Gate Theatre with Hilton Edwards, and they were a gay couple, and everybody knew they were gay, and nobody mentioned it, and they were the only gay men in Ireland for a very long time. Anyway, Mcleomor was a guy called McWilliams, and he came from Penge or somewhere really not very glamorous. Well, of course, all of England is glamorous. So some not very Irish place. He taught himself Gaelic. He spoke in Irish. He had this, and he was part of our national identity. But he'd made himself up entirely. And he had gone into, as a boy at the age of 12, to play Peter Pan, and he was one of the boys in Peter Pan in London. Then he'd moved over, and I do think that Michal's life was part of the gay culture at the time. That was another substratum of a different kind of mobility, a different kind of identity. So he moved over and met Hilton, and they put on the most Irish plays in the world. So I kind of love all that. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some equivalent in Canadian terms, but no.
We have yes. I don't know what it would be. I don't. No. Without getting complicated and political.
Okay. Well, I won't push it. So, but anyway, to be complicated and political, when Katherine decides that she's poetic, she's a little bit mystical, she's considers herself rebellious, and not all those things go with Irish really well, like butter on toast. Okay, they go really well. And so she didn't want to be from Herne Hill, which is where she was from. She wanted some more interesting kind of self to, But when that self-image, and she worked a lot in America and the Irish-American circuit in the 60s and 70s, which was a very particular kind of Irishness in Boston and New York, as the diaspora moved further away from the famine-torn country they'd left in the 1800s. They had this increasingly plastic paddy, we used to call them, shamrock-strewn idea of Ireland. And they also had were inclined to support financially and otherwise some of the members of the IRA, who in 1969 were one kind of people. In 1973 were conducting a bombing campaign in Britain, and in Belfast, in London, and when you grow up through those times. And a really amazing silence descended after Bloody Sunday in our house in Dublin, in our suburban little house where I grew up, and it was quite shameful and difficult, all of it. I don't want to be too simplistic about it, but support for the IRA did not last in many quarters in the south of Ireland, because we were very much of the opinion that killing people was not the way forward, and it was a really, really hard thing. That was a hard thing to happen on the island of Ireland. Anyway, so Norah has and there is a limit to fictions, and I do think that nations are fictions, right? So there is a limit, and the limit in both cases for Katherine was to do with the boundaries of the body. Okay, you can't kill people. Clearly, you can't sexually destroy them either. That the body is the last place for the self in the book. You know what I mean? That's where it becomes real. You know, we dress up, we talk, whatever. Anyway, when it, I don't know if I'm saying it properly, but
No, you
physical
are.
reality is incontrovertible. You know.
Yeah, and in fact, you know, you go through this amazing description of Catherine's CV, this faux CV that I imagine you must have had an amazing amount of fun building all these.
Slightly too much, yes.
Oh, I can't imagine. But
well,
I
people
mean,
either get it or they don't. You know, I mean, I was
I got
laughing
halfway through it and I thought, this must be real. This must be real, because you've got her in these, you know, her defining role is in this film, is Mulligan's Holy War, which is
Yes.
the US, which is itself a remake of a play with a different name. And it's just the fact that you gave it the different name. Was it A Prayer Before Morning? And she's a feisty Irish nun and in a field hospital in Normandy, and it ends with the American Irish love interest soldier dying PA test style in her lap. And then, you know, it's sort of mawkish and over the top.
And then she says, I've lost him surely. But she says, he's taken the East from me and he's taken the West from me. And great. And actually what she's saying there is a translation of an Irish poem. I think it's called Queen Archie Lyra. It's you know, he took the East from me and the West from me. Anyway, yes, I did have fun.
Oh. Clearly, and you had Pauline Kael reviewing it, calling it the twinkle in the wimple. So it's this very misleading, you know, weaving in of real people with the fake, that I thought, well, this must be true. So I'm Googling, and actually nothing is coming up for this. So congratulations.
Okay.
Fantastic. And the play with her in the coma and coming to, and then Orson Welles comes. And then I thought it was sort of interesting, even her decline when she is in butter commercials in her, you know, older age, when she's not getting the roles, and was sort of like Orson Welles himself when he was in these wine. I don't know if you got them in Ireland. The wine.
Oh, did. Or was it port?
No, it was wine. We will serve no wine before its time. It was Ernest and Julio Gallo. It was these California wines.
I have to Google that immediately.
And everyone's, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, there he is. Yeah. Yeah.
And I know there have been kind of great commercials, but everybody thinks, oh, poor Orson Welles. You know, at the time, it's like how far he's fallen. But of course, even the butter commercial becomes sort of iconic for her. But you know, and I love that you made her. She's iconic also of, you say, a certain type of Irish gay man too. So the gays love her, and the men that Norah dates, many of whom turn out to be gay. She catches one of them sniffing her mother's scarf,
crushing it briefly to his face. I don't know if he inhaled.
And then she breaks up with him right afterwards. Anyway, I'm going on telling you what you're about. Your book.
She does come out briefly with two gay men called Michael. Which is the kind of thing that can happen, I suppose.
Oh,
but
sure.
They're more interested really in but
the mother.
There is a thing that happens in the second half of the book, which is what my German editor called the Oedipal crux, which is when Norah starts taking over the narrative. So the daughter starts to it starts to be a book about the writer Norah. Which is a very different life to her mother's, and the moment of kind of reclamation or whatever is when Norah gets a boyfriend and starts to leave her mother romantically, and the mother is kind of has a larger reaction than she's actually socially inclined to do, because she's a bohemian. She's not against, you know, people being in love or anything like that, or having sex, but she feels supplanted or overtaken, or, you know, all of those kind of interesting Oedipal cruxes that happen. So yes, Norah wins, as it were, something.
Although I kept expecting, I think we're used when we read books, and certainly it's a Hollywood trope, that when you have a story about an actress and her daughter, that it's always going to end up with the competition, and the daughter's youth is sort of vampirically, you know, being sucked from the mother. But that only happens sort of briefly here, where yes, Norah comes of age and she has a boyfriend.
Yes.
And for a minute, Catherine is appalled, and you can see that she sees there's been this shift. But then it really, one wonderful thing about the book is their relationship and how bonded they are. And actually how at that moment, that child parent thing gets reversed. And it seemed to me that there's at that point that Norah starts taking care of her and seeing her as fragile.
Yeah, I mean, I've done in different books, various different styles of attachment and non-attachment, but with parents. In my case, usually mothers. But this is a slightly idealized one, where Norah admires her or finds her mother sort of amazing, and so does the rest of the world, and they're in agreement.
Yes.
And she doesn't have a scrabble to assert. She's because she's loved, I suppose, she's able to assert herself at the time she needs to. When she's able to grow up, basically, she's able to grow up, and the mother goes into her own decline. So the second half of the book is not a memoir anymore, except it's more an autobiography. Somebody said to me that memoirs unfailingly hate their subjects by the time they're finished. One of them said, eat their subjects, which I thought was interesting as well. So by sort of getting out from under the story of her mother and turning it into her own story, yes, that is a supplanting. That is, you could say, but it's not an envious one. The envy in the book is all the men. And I don't know if people have, I mean, maybe, I'm sure they have, but I had not seen male envy for female beauty, for female, I mean, beauty is just one word for it, for whatever that talent or joy, charisma, whatever. I had never seen male envy. Well, maybe I had. Anyway, I wanted to do male envy. It seems to me that envy and misogyny are quite close. I was looking at as early a kind of group of emotions as I could do. Things like jealousy are kind of grown up compared to envy. It's like really one-on-one. It's really toxic, and it's really, So I was looking at various toxicities, I suppose. Envious one being one of them, and they were all male in the book.
One of the, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go now. So I'm just thinking. Sorry. You have me thinking now.
Well, it's just because you said about the whole the toxicity in eating. There is this character Holly who shows up, who's part of the sort of frame narrative. The young female academic who wants to write a thesis about Catherine and who wants to sort of mold her and put her into this feminist lens. And I don't know, the term she uses
post-feminist, post-gender feminist, I think.
Right. So she wants to interview and she wants to dig and she wants to find, well, there must have been abuse if there was this. And
I mean, that's the 70s and 80s. She wants to regender her. She wants to know what her sexual style was. And
sexual style. Yes,
but
that's it. And this is very irritating to Norah, and she sort of despises this woman, Holly.
She does, she sort of pushes some flapjacks at her. Would you like a cup of coffee? So no, she decides she's going to write the book, and so when Holly Devan is saying, so what was she like? Meaning, what was her gendering? Was she? She says she is mine. But that was, that was good fun as well, because the languages we use to describe people change. So as we think about things more and our interests shift and realign, we look back at the people in the past and we describe them differently. But I do think that that's a kind of to do an injustice in some regards. Some things are clearly wrong. The wrong things that people did in the past are not less wrong, but to look at everything through the filter of the present is to fail to understand. You have to kind of work on people's own terms somehow, and gendering was not then. it was a freestyle event. You know, I mean, Catherine could have worn suits. It was a much, you know, she could have been. I could have done some of that. I could have had more fun again with those kind of languages, but it hadn't become articulated in the way it is now. Very usefully articulated today.
Mm-hmm. Have you had that experience of having a young academic come to you and try to put your work through the sort of scholarly sausage making machine? Or
I couldn't possibly say.
Oh, yes.
I
Okay.
couldn't possibly comment. I love the clever people being interested in my work. There's nothing better.
Oh, we have a question that has popped up from our little panel here, and because it has to do with mothers, I'm going to ask it. Jordan says, before and during the writing of Actress, were you aware of or writing towards the tradition of novels about mother and daughter relationships? So did you read other novels about it or not at all?
You just actually fell out of whatever, just as in the middle of the question, just at the noun. Could you repeat it? Do you mind, Emily?
Yeah, no problem. The question is about, were you writing to a tradition of novels about mother and daughter relationships? And did you read other novels? I mean, you yourself have a bit of a tradition of
tradition of one, but I'm really definitely going to write about fathers this time. We used to complain in Irish fiction that there were no mothers because they were too important to put in. I mean, John McGahern's mother died when he was 8, and she was far too important to loss ever. It was impossible for him to write about her or discuss her. And I can't remember whose autobiography mentioned his mother, gave her half a sentence in 200 pages. So because she was so utterly important and indescribable, and one might complain, except I do find fathers not equally, but I also look at my own difficulty and blankness and trying to get into or around the figure of a father in a book and say, well, what's that about? So maybe it goes both ways. However, I did look, I mean, I read Carrie Fisher in my early 20s or when those books came out. The cover in the UK and Ireland has a photograph of a young Carrie Fisher looking at Debbie Reynolds on stage, and she's like 5 or 6. She's in a little matinee coat and the little shoes and the pudding bowl haircut, and her mother is just like a living doll out, so glamorous under the spotlight, and that was such a sad and wonderful relationship. They lived beside each other, and Carrie Fisher was mad, whereas Debbie Reynolds was cheerful, which is not. Anyway, Carrie Fisher describes Debbie Reynolds going in. She had a wardrobe that was the size of a room, and she went in one door, her mother, and came out the other end as Debbie Reynolds. And so these moments, which we all remember from our mothers going out, which is always alarming in our case. Where was she going to go? And also the idea that putting on perfume was the idea of leaving. As the only time that I smelled perfume in my childhood was when she was walking out the door. Mm-hmm. To what adventures we do not know. Anyway, so not I did. what do you mean not anymore? Oh yeah.
Well, we're not going out. We're not wearing, and everything is scent free now. So yes.
No, Oh, scent free in Canada. Yes. No, my mother's 92, so not anymore. It's a little bit. Oh yeah. No. She's. The old Zimmer frame isn't being wielded with the same energy as perhaps even 2 years ago. But yeah, I did. I'm sure the questioner has more books in mind than I have. I tend to vague out on these things. I push away books when I'm writing. I check them to see if I'm doing the same thing, and then I over the shoulder. Do
you not read any books when you're writing? Do you avoid novels if you're writing a novel? Are you one of these?
I check them out to see if I'm copying them by accident.
Right.
And yeah, I do, but I do that. I pick things up and I kind of look at them. If I need to get a character across town and I think, oh, well, how does so-and-so get a character across town? I'll pick it up and look at it for technically. I'm always writing, so I can't stop. I couldn't stop reading. I'd never read again, because I mean, novels take me forever. You know, I'm always working on them.
Right. Well, to mothers and daughters, you have a daughter, and you are about the age now that Katherine is in the novel when she dies, correct? Which is not that old.
No.
Right?
It's up there.
Here?
No, it's my cosmetic surgery.
Your headphones,
No, it could be younger. It could be younger.
But you have this, you know, I think as readers, when we read a book, often if it's a first person narrator, as Norah is, you know, the default is to sort of assume that the author in some way identifies with this character, especially in the case of Norah, who is a novelist, as you are. But, you know, then there's Katherine, who is about your age. And, you know, when you're writing these two, you're sort of, it's the experience of being a mother now yourself with older children, or
well, Katherine and her madness, she was 52 when she shot Boyd. She died at 57, 58, and I looked at those figures quite carefully. I was very struck by, I was reading a biography of Flann O'Brien, wonderful Irish writer. He died at 54 of I think esophageal cancer, and you know, he was in the pubs all the time, and he was one of those characters, and Niall Duggan is a bit like him actually in the book, where, you know, those Irish drinkers, everyone thought they were harmless and just hilarious, but he was so gone in his alcoholism. Anyway, he died at 54. People died very young, and so I don't necessarily age-wise know what age I am at any given moment. I don't have a language of age developed yet that I can tap into. I do think that, you know, around 50 is a very emotionally busy time for both men and women, midlife as it's called. But my own experience of mothering, yes, I suppose it does go in. I couldn't really describe it. What am I writing now? Okay, this is what I'm writing now.
Oh,
this.
There you go. You saw the question.
That's my little joke to Fran in the comments. And this. So now
Are
you know.
Gonna sign it later for everybody?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. There we go, and that's it. That's signed.
Am I here? So you guys want to keep going, or I just?
Yes, there are film rights to actress Diana.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry,
that's great.
I diminished your. I love that idea of ending on what happens when you're in your 50s. As someone who's about to turn 50, it is a moment. It's a little self-indulgent, but I love thinking about this. And I know Randy Boyagoda wrote a little bit about this in one of our podcast episodes about in your 50s, you are at the kind of it's the most unhappy time of your life for some reason. And but you come out of it, and I think I love thinking about that, and particularly in reference to your book, Anne, because it is such a
urgent, kind of passionate time. When people think of 50 as just grey and different, but everyone I know went bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're not old, but you're not young, so it's kind of this weird transition period.
Yeah.
But to Anne's point, being 50 in the 70s, and
was a whole different thing.
Yeah, it's like dog years to human years now. You know, it's like, it's 78 then.
Do you ever have that experience where you see someone in your mind, you think, oh, that's an older person, and then you realize, oh, they're probably the same age as me, or maybe even younger, and
then you realize you're walking into the window at the department store. That's never happened to me. Get that Elwyn out of my way. Why is that Elwyn coming straight for me? I can't go anywhere anymore. Anyway.
Well, I'm going to say thank you to the both of you for that. And just a quick reminder, if you click on the green button under the video feed there, that's going to take you to onepagelit.ca, where you can buy Anne's book, both actress and some of her earlier novels and short story collections. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Emily, for taking this on.
Thank you, Emily.
And thank you so much. I know you're often swamped with events, and you squeeze this in, and we really, really appreciate your time.
I'm pretending I was on a plane, Gregory.
Yeah,
I jumped when I got the opportunity. Very excited.
Wouldn't we love to be on planes right now, or maybe not?
Yes.
So thank you everyone for watching. We're going to end very quickly with a message from Leslie Herdig at the Vancouver Writers Festival. And just a reminder, if you click follow along the top there, Canada's Virtual Literary Series, you'll be able to get notified every time we add a new event. Tommy Orange coming up, Wapgishik Rice is interviewing him. Plus we have James McBride, Lisa Ray, and Yo Nesbo, and some other great events coming up all through the fall. So check that out. And in addition, we're going to be adding events for all of Canada's libraries, systems, and its festivals on onepage.lit.ca. So you can check out the content all over the country, from big cities to small little towns. It's going to be really exciting. Thank you, everyone. And on that note, I am going to figure out how I can play.
I am putting my plug. I'll put my plug. Thanks,
Okay.
Emily. Thanks so much. Bye-bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Anne.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye,
Thank you.
Canada.
Bye, Anne. Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, now we're going to play. Okay, here we go.
Hi there, my name is Leslie Hertig, and I'm the Artistic Director at the Vancouver